Okay, welcome back to another video. In this video, we're going to be learning how to multiply matrices. So we've done adding matrices, subtracting matrices, and also multiplying matrices by scalars or just numbers, right? Um, and so what we're going to do in this is how do you multiply matrices together? And this is actually a lot trickier than the other things we've been doing. This gets quite tedious. The way that we define multiplying, well, not tedious, but it's a lot more complicated than how we have defined addition and scalar multiplication. Okay, so basically, and I know when you see this, you're going to be like, why the heck do we define matrix multiplication in this way? Um, the reasons for it are a little beyond what I want to get into in this video, but essentially the reason why is because it works well with the natural world. It helps us in graphics a lot. Anything related to computers. Um, anyway, there's so many applications of it. I I won't go into all of them, but anyway, the way we multiply matrices is there's a reason for it, and it just makes our lives easier by multiplying them this way. Okay. Well, I mean, as opposed at least it makes matrices more useful for us to describe the real world. Okay, so how we multiply matrices. I'm going to start by doing AB here, the product AB. So I'm going to be doing the matrix A, 1, 3, -1, 0. And I'm going to be timesing it by the matrix B. Okay, -1, 5, 2, 0, 4, 7. And when we're done here, we'll end up with another matrix, okay? Another matrix that I'll tell you how to compute. So essentially, what I'm going to do here is, well, let's maybe get some brackets here. What I'm going to do here is I am going to take rows of this matrix, of the matrix on the left. So I'm going to be looking at the rows of this matrix and timesing it by the columns of this matrix. Okay, so here, here, and here. Okay, and so essentially what I'm going to be doing, and this is maybe a little bit complicated, but once you get it, it's not too bad, of you're going to take this row, this horizontal row here, and you are going to times it by the column, okay, and then add your results together. So this 1 is going to get times by this -1, and this 3, since it's on the right, is going to be times by the thing on the bottom, okay? So in other words, what I get for my first entry of this new matrix, how I'm going to get that is I use the first row of the left matrix and the first column of the second matrix, okay? So I would do 1 times -1, so -1, and then I'm going to do plus 3 times 0, okay, or 0. So that would be my first entry in the product of these two matrices, okay? And I could simplify that as well. So I'll do that in a sec. But first I want to show you kind of how you compute it, okay? So to get the spot below on this matrix, the spot that's right here, what we're going to do is it's in the first column, right? And it's in the second row. So I'm going to take the second row from this one, the first column from this one, and now I'm going to do this row times this column, okay? So I'm going to do this -1 times -1, and then 0 times 0. Okay, so you could kind of think of flipping these sideways, and then you just multiply straight across. Okay, so what do we get here? We do -1 times -1. Okay, and then we're going to add that to 0 times 0. Again, I'm just writing out every detail here. We can simplify this more later. Okay, so that's kind of the pattern here, is when you're multiplying matrices, you take the rows of the entry you're trying to figure out and the column, and then you multiply the row and the column in the corresponding matrices. Okay, so let's see how this works even further. So now I'm looking for this spot in my matrix. Okay, so that would be first row, second column. Okay, so first row, second column means I'm going to use the first row here, second column now. Okay, so I do 1 times 5 plus 3 times 4. Okay, so I take this row times by this column. Okay, I do a similar thing to get this spot, right? Only now I'm doing second row, second column. So second row, second column. So -1 times 5 is -5, and then 0 times 4 plus 0 times 4. Okay? Now we're not quite done yet. We have second row. Okay? What about third row? Well, sorry, third column. Third column, we're going to use the third column from this matrix, and then first and second rows here. So for the first thing here, we're going to use first row, third column. So first row, 1 times 2 plus 3 times 7. Running out of space. Okay? And then we do this row, second row, because now we're in the second row here, times the third column. So -1 times 2 is -2, and 0 times 7 plus 0 times 7. Okay? So that's how we multiply matrices. And I guess I should mention, right, there isn't a third row to this matrix here, so there's not going to be a third row in my product matrix. Also, there's not a fourth column in this matrix here, so there's not going to be a fourth column here. Okay, let me put in, that was my marker squeaking. Okay, there, let me put in another bracket there. So now I just simplify the entries. So I get 3 times 0 is 0, and then I'm going to add that to -1 is -1. -1 times -1 is +1 plus zeros, so +1. 1 times 5 is 5 plus 3 times 4, 12. So 5 plus 12 is 17. -5 plus 0 times 4 is -5. Okay. 1 times 2 is 2. Plus 3 times 7. 3 times 7 is 21. So 21 plus 2 is 23. Negative 2 plus 0 times 7. 0 times 7 is 0, so just negative 2. Okay, so this is our matrix. This is our product matrix. Okay, so you're just taking rows of the first matrix and timesing it by columns of the second matrix. Okay, and to kind of demonstrate further, this won't work for any two matrices, right? In order for this to work, you have to have the rows and columns kind of line up. So to demonstrate this, I'm going to show you, let's try and do BA. Okay, let's do B times by A instead of A times by B. Okay, and you may think initially, those two should be the same thing. Well, it turns out for matrices, they're not. Okay, and I'll show you why. So we've got B is this matrix here, negative 1, 0, 5, 4, 2, and 7. I'm going to times it by 1, negative 1, 3, and 0. Okay, so this would be BA. So to do this, I'm going to take the rows of the first matrix. So these are my rows of my first matrix, and I'm going to be timesing them by the columns of my second matrix. Okay. Now you'll notice when you try and do this, okay, when you try and do this, for our first entry, we're going to take the first row here, this first row, and we're going to times it by this first column here, okay? But, so I have negative 1 times 1 plus, so negative 1 times 1 plus 5 times negative 1. But then there's a 2 here and there's nothing here. Okay, so it would be 2 times something, but there's nothing there. There should be in order for this product to work. So this matrix multiplication is actually undefined. Okay, because you don't have, when you actually take a row here times a column here, they don't really line up so that you have the same number of entries in them. Okay, so in other words, for this to work, you've got to have that the number of columns in this matrix, right? This one is a 2 by 2 matrix. So there's 2 columns. That needs to be the same as the number of rows in this matrix, right? So this is a 2 by 3 matrix. So as long as these two things on the inside, the number of columns of this matrix and the number of rows of that matrix, as long as those are the same, you can multiply the matrices together. Okay? I know this is kind of a weird way of multiplying matrices. I promise it's useful. And I'm going to show you another example of this in the next video, so hopefully we get really good at multiplying matrices.